When it comes to designing patterns, color is hands down my absolute favorite part. With just a few tweaks in Photoshop, you can create so many beautiful color palettes out of just one piece of artwork. And personally, I do this for just about every single design in my portfolio. So besides just being a fun thing to do, creating color alterations is actually a really smart strategy if you want to optimize and boost your potential for gaining sales. This original pink and blue color palette is really lovely, but what if a customer or a client is specifically looking for something else like yellow or teal? Instead of losing out on a potential licensing deal or sale, you can easily adjust color within your artwork to create multiple versions out of the exact same design. Sometimes I even wind up liking a particular color alt more than the original design. Plus, exploring color is a fabulous way of expanding your portfolio. If you're planning on uploading your pattern to print-on-demand sites like Spoonflower or Society6, creating 5 or 10 color palettes will give you 5 or 10 more designs to upload. This is all about working smarter, not harder, so let's get into it. So the way we're going to be creating our color alts today is right here in this block file. Then we'll do that same step we did earlier of defining the pattern and then filling it in the pattern file. But for now, go ahead and open up your block right here, and this is where we're going to start. So the first thing I'm going to do is over here in my layers panel, it is pretty chaotic. There is a lot going on here. So what I'm going to do is scroll to the top of my layers panel, select this first layer, scroll all the way to the bottom, select this last layer. I don't care about the background. And I'm going to press Command G to group all of these layers together within the same group. I'm going to double click the layer name and change it to Working. Working simply indicates that this has all of the editable pieces all within that same folder. We're going to be flattening this later on when we make our color alts, so it's always nice to have one folder that has all of those individual elements in it. That way, if you ever want to go back later and make some adjustments, you'll still have it here within that working file. I'll go ahead and tap that caret next to the folder icon to consolidate it in my layers panel. Remember, that background is not in the working folder, it's down here underneath it. So what we want to do is click your working folder to select it, and we're going to make a copy of that folder. So with that layer selected, Command J on your keyboard will duplicate it. This may take a minute or two because there are so many layers within that folder, so that's the first thing we're going to deal with. We're actually going to consolidate all of these layers and flatten them. And this is why it's really important that that background is not in that folder. So if you toggle down that caret and scroll to the bottom of your folder, you should see that there's no background there. It's down here outside of our folders at the bottom of the layers panel. And the reason this is important is because we are going to flatten that entire folder. All right, so scrolling back up to the top of my layers panel, I can go ahead and click this caret next to Working Copy to consolidate it. And now, with that layer selected, I'm going to hit Command E on my keyboard. Now what this has done is it's taken all of the elements within that folder and flattened them into one layer. So now, if you want to move one individual piece, the entire layer is going to be moving because we no longer have those individual elements. They've all been merged into one layer. But that's okay because I have this working file right underneath, so that will always be there for me if I need it. So go ahead and click on that topmost layer to select it. And the first thing we're going to do is play with the hue and saturation. So I'm going to go up here to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation. Go ahead and press OK. And now over here in our Properties panel, we can adjust the saturation, kind of like how we did before, with very bright and saturated, then very desaturated. You can bring that back to 0 to reset. But what I want to do here is play with that hue spectrum. So if you click the toggle under Hue, you can bring it along the spectrum and see in real time how those colors can adjust. So at the far left end of the spectrum, we're getting this nice bright green and blue. And if we bring it back to the center and bring it to the right, we'll get some other cool color variations as well. Whatever the far right looks like is going to be the exact same as what the far left looks like. Either way, it's a 180 color difference. So when I'm playing around with hue and saturation like this, one of my favorite ways to position the toggle is to bring it here all the way to the 180. In my opinion, having these polar opposite colors usually makes for pretty interesting results. In this case though, I really like what's happening over here with this lavender and sage palette. I think it's really interesting, so I think this is going to be the first one I go with. So it looks like it's at -112 up here on my hue panel. I think that looks really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that hue and saturation layer is selected, hold down Shift and click my working copy, and then hit Command G on my keyboard to group those two together. Now I'll double click the group name and title it the name of my color palette. So in this case, Lavender Sage. And just like that, we have our first color palette completed. So one thing I want to address real quick is why I went with this adjustment layer instead of just going to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation like we did earlier, and then playing with the hue here. What we did was go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation. So it's the exact same tool, hue and saturation. The only difference is by making it an adjustment layer, we have a little bit more flexibility. This is what I mean. So this adjustment layer actually lives on top of that original palette. That means that at any point, we can always go back into that adjustment layer and make some minute changes if we'd like to. The way that we adjusted color wasn't on the layer itself, so that always remains perfectly preserved. Instead, it's a layer right above it. So that way, if later on I'm trying to remember how I achieved this exact color, I can always open up my file here, toggle down into the layers, and take an exact look to see the changes I made. Again, this is just a personal preference because I like having a little bit more control with my files. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap this caret next to lavender and sage to consolidate that layer. Awesome, so now that we have one color alteration created, let's go ahead and do another one. For this next one, it's going to be a technique called spot editing color, and that's where you adjust color of one part of the illustration, but then you leave the color in the other parts of the illustration consistent. So in this case, I'm going to change just the petals of my illustration, those pink orangey areas, and I'm going to leave the leaves exactly the same. I'll show you how. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that that lavender sage layer is selected, and then hit Command J on your keyboard to duplicate that layer. While I'm over here, I'm just going to go ahead and toggle off the visibility of those other layers because I don't really need to see what's going on down there right now. All right, I'm going to click the caret to toggle down my layer and select the layer thumbnail for hue and saturation. I'm going to bring this right back to 0. And now we're right back to our original color palette. And at this point, I'm going to get that magic wand out again. So I'm going to come down here, click my layer to select all of these illustrations, and then I'm going to press W on my keyboard. You could also get there by coming over here to your menu bar and making sure that your magic wand tool is selected. And up here at this upper menu bar, I'm going to bring this tolerance up to 50. That means it's going to select a lot more pink than it otherwise would if it were still at 32. And I want to make sure that contiguous is turned off. Remember, that means that if I select one pink area now, all of the pink areas within our artboard will be selected. It's a little confusing right now because we're in that pattern preview, but remember, everything that's on the outside of this blue box is just Photoshop showing us what the seamless pattern will look like. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, Command++, and I'm going to select all of the warm tones within my illustration. So I'll hold down Shift on my keyboard and click the other areas that are orange and pink. So holding down Shift, I'm going to click in here. Still holding down Shift, I'm just going to keep clicking and selecting until I get all of these warm tones selected by my magic wand. If you ever want to check and see if you selected everything, you can go ahead and cut it out by hitting Command X, and it still looks like we've got some pink areas left. So I'll press Z on my keyboard and zoom into some of those areas, and then Command Z to undo that cut. Now I'll press W to get back to my wand, press and hold Shift on my keyboard, and click and select these remaining areas. Looks like there's a few bits over here, and maybe over here. Awesome, I think I got everything. I'll go ahead and check it, so Command X. Yeah, oh, almost. Command Z, press W to get to my wand, hold down Shift, and let's click and grab these areas as well. Command 0 to fit to screen, and Command X to cut it all out. Awesome, I think we got just about all of those warm tones. So Command Z will undo that cut, and now I have all of those warm tones selected that I'd like to edit the color for. And the way I'm going to do that is by making a mask over here on my adjustment layer. So there's already a mask in place. It's this white box right here. Go ahead and click that box to select it, Control click, and hit Delete Layer Mask. And now with this selection in place, we're going to add our own. So again, that hue and saturation layer is selected. I'm going to go down here to this little icon that says Add Layer Mask, and I'm going to click it. Awesome. So it doesn't look like a whole lot happened on screen. You'll see that that layer mask has a lot of shapes in there. All of the black areas of this box indicate this layer underneath it showing through. But because over here in our hue and saturation, we're right back at 0, you can't really see any changes. So let's go ahead and change that. So again, with that hue and saturation thumbnail selected, not the mask, but the hue and saturation, I'm going to come over here to my hue and start playing with it on the spectrum. This is pretty cool. So now we're seeing the color of those petals change, but those leaves remain the exact same. And that's because that's the leaf layer down here showing through. So again, I'm going to click, make sure that hue and saturation thumbnail is highlighted, and I'm going to play around over here on my hue spectrum until I find something kind of cool. I really like what's happening over here with these really vibrant blue petals. I think that's a really nice monotone color palette with all of these blues coming through. One thing I want to see though is what if I have all of the leaves completely desaturated so that the flower petals really pop. I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is come over here to my layers panel, make sure that this hue and saturation layer is selected, and then hit Command J on my keyboard, which duplicates the layer. So that duplicated the action, so we're getting some pretty crazy colors up here with the flower petals, but we're going to fix that real quick. So again, I want to make sure that that mask is selected, not the hue and saturation thumbnail, but the mask itself, and I'm going to invert that mask. So Command I will invert. And now I can come over here, select my hue and saturation thumbnail, and bring that saturation all the way down to completely desaturate those leaves. And now Command minus minus minus, this is really cool. Having these very vibrant blue flowers and petals, and then these completely desaturated black and gray leaves, I think is really nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this one a finalized color palette. So I'll come over here to my folder name, double click it, and change it to blue-gray. And then I can click that caret to consolidate the layers. Cool, so that is our second color alt completed. So I'm gonna show you how to do another one using complementary colors. I do this all the time within my illustrations. I think complementary tones look really good in a design. And when I say complementary, I mean colors that are across each other on the color wheel. So red and green, blue and orange, purple and yellow. You get the idea. So let's go ahead and try out a complementary color palette over here in our file. So the first thing I'm going to do over here with my blue-gray layer selected is to hit Command J to duplicate it on my layers panel. I can go ahead and turn off the visibility of that original layer and then toggle down on this caret to open up our layers. I'm going to go ahead and hide the visibility of both of these adjustment layers and start from scratch. So I'll click my working copy, go up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and this time I'm going to go for Color Balance. Go ahead and press OK. And this time we're going to get a slightly different menu over here in our Properties panel. We're going to play with these in a little bit, but first let's go over here and adjust our masks. So remember, we made these masks by using the magic wand and selecting out all of the pink and orange within our composition. I don't want to have to do that all over again, so I want to use that existing mask. So over here in my Layers panel, I'm going to click on my layer mask next to Color Balance, Control-click it, and hit Delete Layer Mask. Now I can grab this mask right up here from my hue and saturation, drag it on top of Color Balance, and now I'll be able to adjust the colors only for certain parts of the illustration. So I don't need these two anymore, so I can go ahead and select this layer and hit delete on my keyboard. Same with this one up here, delete, twice. Awesome, so now let's go through and start spot editing this color to create a complementary color palette. And so because this mask represents the color of the petals, that's what we're gonna change first. So I'll come over here to my color balance icon, and first just play around. What happens if I bring the cyan all the way to the left, or red all the way to the right? Same thing with magenta or green. We're getting some really cool stuff here. The yellow all the way to the left, all the way to the right. Ooh, that's kind of fun. But remember, what we're going for here is a complementary color palette. So in this case, I want to see what it looks like with bright orange flowers and then blue leaves. Because remember, orange and blue are across from each other on the color wheel, which means it's a perfect complementary palette. So again, making sure that your color balance layer thumbnail is selected, let's go back up here, and I'm going to bring these yellows all the way down to -100, because what I'm going for here is an orange color palette for these petals and flowers. But it didn't get me all the way. There's still a lot of pink and blush coming through. So I think what we need to do is click here where it says midtones, and we're going to change it to shadows. So just like we changed the midtone values earlier, we can do the same thing with shadows and bring it all the way to the right or left for all of these spectrums. So pretty fun stuff. But remember, I'm going for an orange, so I'm going to bring that red slightly up, bring that green all the way to the right, and we're getting really close over here, and I think this might do the trick. I'll bring the yellow all the way to the left. Perfect. So that got us a really nice orange tone for these petals and flowers. So there we have it, our perfect complementary color palette. So that is actually Color Alt, what are we on now? Color Alt 3 of the color alts that we'll be exploring today. So I'm gonna go ahead and change the name of this layer to Orange Blue. Next up, I'm gonna show you how you can key colors together so that it feels more harmonious as a palette. So I'll go back to my Layers panel, tap that caret to consolidate the orange-blue layer, and with that layer selected, I'll hit Command J to duplicate. Go ahead and toggle off the visibility of that underneath layer, and let's bring that caret down. I'm going to go ahead and click this entire color balance layer and delete it from my Layers panel, and we're going to start right back here where we began. So in order to key colors, what that means is I'm going to choose one color to overlay on all of these layers and really sync these colors together. So I'll show you what I mean. So with that working copy layer selected, I'm going to go down here to the bottom of my Layers panel and click to create a new layer. And now I have a blank layer right above it. What I want to do is fill this layer with a solid color. So I'm gonna go all the way over here to my left menu bar, click this black square, and I'm gonna change my foreground color. Let's see, let's try a purple, and then I'll press OK. And I wanna fill in this square with purple. So I'll press G on my keyboard to get to my fill bucket tool. You can also get there over here on your menu bar and going down to selecting Paint Bucket tool. And now just click anywhere within your artboard. Remember, that's within this square right here. And now my entire pattern is turned purple. I'll show you how to fix that. And this is where the real magic happens. So if you click up here in your transparency mode where it says normal, you can explore so many different transparency modes. So let's kind of toggle through and find one that's working really well. Ooh, color burn is actually really nice. That flood of purple really sinks into the existing colors. I think that's really nice, so that's a strong contender. Let's see some others. Ooh, lighten is actually really nice too. That's some really beautiful pastels coming through. Screen and lighten are very similar, but yeah, those are nice. Color dodge. I like lighter color too. So all of these transparency blending modes give you some pretty cool opportunities to key in color and make it a little bit more harmonious. But the one I'm leaning to most is color burn right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and click to select. Awesome. I love how deep and vibrant this palette got just by having this layer right over it. You can toggle on and off the visibility to see what it looks like without and with. Very cool. I'm gonna go ahead and name this palette Magenta Indigo. And there was actually another transparency mode I really liked for this, so I'm gonna go ahead and create that really quickly since I already know it works. I'll go ahead and consolidate the caret, press Command J to duplicate the layer, turn off the visibility of the layer under it, toggle that caret down, go back into my purple layer, and I'm gonna change that to lighten because I really loved that pastel. I think it's really beautiful, especially with this mint pairing against the pinks and purples. Beautiful. So I'm gonna go ahead and name this folder Periwinkle. And that is a really simple way to create an additional color palette. That took 2 seconds. So quick reminder to go ahead and save your progress, so Command S. All right, so that is a wrap for color alterations. I'm gonna stop right here before I drag you into a dozen more. Trust me, it is really easy to go down that rabbit hole. So like I mentioned earlier, for every design I create, I'll generally make about 5 or 10 color alterations. So you can continue exploring yours to your heart's content. If you want to dive even deeper into color exploration and play in Photoshop, I have another Skillshare class called Cultivating Color. Vary palettes in original art and grow your portfolio. In that class, you'll learn how to create even more color alterations in Photoshop. You can watch it by clicking my name up top and scrolling down my profile until you see all of my classes. All right, that is a wrap for color. Let's move on to the next step, which is infusing metallic accents right into your artwork.